Hello everyone, so today I would like to tell you about the history of cannibalism. But first thing first, I want to ask you, have you ever eaten a human flesh? Well, I hope the answer is no, I haven't. But if you don't, I'll ask you to stay away from me because I don't want to be eaten. So yeah, cannibalism. Cannibalism is the act of consuming another individual of the same species as a food. So for example is the one that we mentioned earlier. You eat me, or something like that. And talking about cannibalism, especially if you are Indonesian, have you ever heard of Sumanto? Well, if you did, what did you know about him? Well, sure, that's a lot of fact about Sumanto. So yeah, Sumanto is Indonesian cannibal that stole 3 bodies from cemeteries and then cooked and ate them. But not only eating it by himself, he also shared it to his family and his neighbor. So that's such a kind/bad act at the same time. Yeah, he also mentioned that human flesh tastes like pork or rat, like that. Back to the topic. 15th century Europeans believed they had hit upon a miracle cure, a remedy for epilepsy, hemorrhage, bruising, nausea, and any other medical ailment. This brown powder could be mixed into drinks, made into salves, or eaten straight up. It was known as mamia and made by grinding up mummified human flesh. Yeah. And that's an example of cannibalistic practices that happened across history. So today I would like to tell you about how does cannibalism happen, how common it is, etc. But first we're gonna talk about the term. The word cannibal dated back from the time of Christopher Columbus. In fact, Columbus may even coin it himself. After coming ashore on the island of Guadeloupe, Columbus' initial reports back to the Queen of Spain, Queen Isabella, described the indigenous people as friendly and peaceful. Though he did mention of rumors of a group called the Caribs, who made violent raids and then cooked and ate their prisoners. In response, Queen Isabella granted permission to capture and enslave anyone who ate human flesh. And when the island failed to produce the gold that Columbus was looking for, he began to label anyone who resisted his plundering and kidnapping as a Caribe. Somewhere along the way, the word Carib became cannibal and then cannibal, first used by the colonizer to dehumanize indigenous people. So, the term itself comes from an account that wasn't based on hard evidence, but cannibalism does have a real and much more complex history. It has taken diverse forms, sometimes as with mumia, the one that we mentioned earlier. It doesn't involve recognizable part of human body. And the reason for cannibalistic practices has varied too. Somewhere across culture and time period, there's evidence of survival cannibalism, when people living through a famine, siege, or ill-fated expedition had to eat the bodies of the dead or starve to death themselves. But it's quite common for culture to normalize some form of eating human flesh under ordinary circumstances. And because of false accounts like Columbus's, it's difficult to say exactly how common cultural cannibalism has been. But there are still some examples of accepted cannibalistic practices from within the cultures practicing them. Take the example of medicinal cannibalism in Europe during Columbus' time. Starting in the 15th century, the demand for mumia increased a lot. At first, stolen mummies from Egypt can supply the mumia craze, but soon the demand was too great to be sustained on Egyptian mummies alone, and because of that, opportunists stole bodies from European cemeteries to turn them into mumia. And the use of mumia continues for hundreds of years, and it was listed in the Merck's Index, which is a popular medical encyclopedia into the 20th century. And ground-up mummies were far from the only remedy made from human flesh that was common throughout Europe. Blood in either liquid or powdered form was used to treat epilepsy. Meanwhile, human liver, gallstone, oil distilled from human brain, and pulverized heart were popular medical concoctions. In China, the written record of socially accepted cannibalism goes back almost 2,000 years, and one particularly common form of cannibalism appears to be filial cannibalism, when adult son and daughter would offer a piece of their own flesh to their parents. This was typically as a last-ditch attempt to cure a sick parent and wasn't fatal for their offspring, and it usually involved the flesh from the thigh or less often a finger. Cannibalistic funerary rites are another form of culturally sanctioned cannibalism. Perhaps the best known example comes from the Fore people of New Guinea. In the mid-20th century, members of community would, if possible, make their funerary preferences known in advance. So sometimes they invite family members together to consume the body after death. Tragically, though this ritual to honor the deceased, but it also spread a deadly disease known as kuru through the community. The conclusion. After all what I said, what does it mean? Well, between the fictionalized stories, verifiable practices, and the big gaps that still exist in our knowledge, there is no one history of cannibalism. But we do know that humans has been eating each other, volunteering themselves to be eaten, and accusing others of eating people for millennia. And that's the end of my presentation. Hope you like it, and I hope you don't be a cannibal. Thank you.